Favorite scene? There were a lot. There were a lot of cool, fun scenes to shoot. Probably the black dome scene where there were girls there and there were the extras and everything. It was really fun to shoot because of the lighting. It was funny when I got there, the studio actually didn't have their big light setup that I wanted. They didn't have it, and so we had to hold production for like an hour for them to set it up. So that was a kind of a fluke, but it was fun. I put the camera on a dolly and I kind of dollied my way through the actors and whatnot, and I would plan it there, click record for however many seconds, stop the recording, move it back around, get another shot and another shot. And yeah, it was cool. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, probably that one. Acting wise, it was phenomenal. And I had a LSU jersey, and looking at the BTS pics, it's so funny because it's such like a serious topic and serious scene, and I have a football jersey honing around a camera. So that was pretty funny. The girls were my favorite part because they were amazing. They were great troopers and they were phenomenal. Yeah, they were down to help out, and yeah. Rehearsals were really fun because one, everybody really brought their A game even throughout rehearsals. It was cool just trying different things, even being there with Val. It was really cool. We got to have some really cool intimate moments. And then even in rehearsals when I had, um, you know, Ross, Frankie, Isabel, and Matt, even when I had like to operate kind of four actors. And then even I had to jump in on the scene, which was kind of a challenge at some points. But no, rehearsals were fun. We had probably total about between all the scenes, probably like 8, 10 rehearsals between all the different actors, and then plus the auditions. But no, rehearsals are a great way to execute a scene. So that way, when we have to film the scene, we don't really spend that much time doing it. So my goal when it comes to rehearsals is really, I can't stand it when actors don't want to rehearse. 9 times out of 10, if they don't want to rehearse, I pick another actor because and I lie to them. I tell them, hey, no, I'm doing rehearsals for me, so that way I can, see what works and what doesn't. No, I do rehearsals for the actors. So that way they get the lines down, but even forget about the lines. So that way they understand the scene. So that way when we don't get on set, they haven't prepared anything. They haven't had any chemistry reads with any of the other actors, and it's just a horrible time on set because and we spent all this money and it looks horrible because they didn't want to spend 2, 3, 4 hours out of their week to rehearse. So the main goal to rehearse is to really get down to let the actors play around with the scene so that way they understand it and so it's stuck in their brain. That way when I put a camera in front of them, they're ready to go and they don't freeze up. Character wise, Charlie, it's really cool because he's really like calm. He's not like a high intensity type of character. So I think it was really fun kind of tapping into that, even when he's offered to go to this one area, that a secret location or secret meeting. He's very calm about it. He's not like flipping out. And then even when he gets there, he's also not flipping out either, even though this is the most illegal thing that he's probably been to. So that was probably the most of the connecting with him is being like calm, not overdoing it. The hardest scene to put together was probably the Black Dome scene. I had to get 18 extras. I had to get 10 black cloaks, people that would wear black cloaks, and then 8 girls. I wanted 8 girls. I ended up with 7. I probably should have aimed for like 10 girls, and then maybe I would have gotten 8. Shoot for the stars. You'll probably get to the moon type thing. But I wanted 8, but I got with 7. So I got a total of 17 extras, and then plus there were like 2 PAs, my sound guy, lamp, and a gaffer and a grip. So and like everybody, what was nice was everybody was working for free. I paid them with some food and some great footage. So that one was I was so generous enough for them to do that. But that was like really hard to put together. And then it was like I had to hit up 25 people to lock down one date, and then that date had to get changed because the city, Los Angeles City, was going to come in and inspect the location. So I had to contact those 25 people again and change the date. Then I had to change the date again. I had to change like three dates, and it was a hassle. And then filming it was actually pretty easy. It wasn't really that hard. I think the hardest part was just waiting on everybody to get dressed. Just kind of having to just sit there and wait. Yeah, which was not fun because we only had like 5 hours to shoot it. So, but no, it all worked out. Directing and acting, I would say the most difficult part was getting into the headspace of acting when it was time to shoot, because I keep a very minimal set, and so running around and setting up lights and making sure the camera angle looks good, is a really fun part that I really like. But then when it came to acting, because the character was very calm, I just had to kind of take a second and just be in the present. It was definitely a challenge, but I would say it was fun to put myself in that position. Yeah. The plot came I came up with the plot through watching Eyes Wide Shut. It's a fantastic film. What's cool about Eyes Wide Shut is, that whole movie is really about a couple who is tempted with all of these sexual desires because they have access to all of these, all their fantasies. But in the end, they stay true to themselves. You know, so and if you think about it, it's like, wow, that's a very like beautiful message. And so from that, I was like, that would be that scene with Tom Cruise and the house and all the masks and everything. That's not really like a hard scene to shoot. You have one light beaming down on everybody. You have a big open space and they're all wearing masks and everything. So it's not really a tough scene. Um, but when it came to the plot, I thought, instead of a doctor, what if it's a kid who he wants to, be a somebody in the animation world? And due to things that have gone around, stories and documentaries that have come out at some people that work at these animation studios, um I thought, oh, that'd be an interesting story, if he really truly finds out what goes on in a studio that makes movies for children, you know so yeah, it's kind of Eyes Wide Shut was a big part of it, obviously, and then coming up with the animation part just kind of flowed with everything. So yeah. I wish I could have shot a couple more different scenes. I wish I would have been able to make it a little longer. But as far as the FBI scene, which is the last scene, that was a whole scene with lines. My character tells the FBI agents the line is, "I'm not doing Trevor," which is basically telling them, "Hey, you guys had me turn in John. I'm not going to do Trevor." I ended up cutting out all the lines and just adding music to it just because I thought it was more powerful. But if they're looking back now, I think it would be a cool thing to see what it would look like with the lines in it. But for the most part, people, they really liked it. The actors that were there, and they realized, oh wow, he cut the lines. Oh, they realized they thought it was more powerful. So I would say, yeah, probably adding more scenes if I could, and then I don't know, maybe adding that one scene with the lines in there. Shooting the Black Dome scene, when it comes to being, if I was uncomfortable, I wasn't uncomfortable really at all, mainly because one, everybody kind of knew each other. All the girls knew each other, and I had told them, straight up. I said, "Hey, look, I wasn't gonna make this R." I told them there's no nudity. I guess you could say there's partial nudity, but you're clothed with a two-piece lingerie, and I knew every single one of them. I knew, there was Eden, Sophia, Nicole, Emily, Jimmy, Val, Destiny, and Tiffany, and I knew, they were all really nice. They're all very friendly. So no, I wasn't uncomfortable at all. And if anything, I was not stressed out, but I was focused on getting all these shots down, which was, I guess, which was uncomfortable in it of itself. When it came to chemistry between me and Val, it came super easy. She's really nice. She's a great actress, phenomenal. Um, Even in the audition, it was fun to see how differently she played each take. It was cool. I was like, okay, play this one like I'm your brother. Let's play it like we're siblings. Let's play this like, we're hitting on each other. Like we both think we're extremely good looking and we want to go out together. Let's play this like we hate each other. There was a bunch. It was really cool seeing how well and easy she was able to adapt. And I think she has such a great, natural, amazing personality. She's really funny. She loves to sing randomly. And so, knowing how playful she was in person, I knew the chemistry was just gonna, be clockwork. So, yeah, it was chemistry with her was very, very easy. Podcast scene. That was fun. That was fun. It was I didn't use any lights. I had one light in the background, but it was just on the wide shot to kind of show that, this is a podcast scene. But that was all natural light. We shot it by a window or by a bunch of windows in the living room area. And GT, my sound guy, set up two mics and we had the props there and everything. I put one wide shot and two close ups. That was it. And each take was about, or each camera angle was about 4 to 5 takes, and it was simple. It was really simple. There wasn't a lot going on. I knew there's a fun fact. I knew it was so. I thought it was too long that I needed to add not Charlie. Well, I added him too, but I needed to add John and Trevor watching. So that's when I cut to that. But that was, that wasn't in the script. I put the podcast scene together and I was like, dang, I feel like the story is drawing away. I don't want it to be too honed in on Katie because this is really about John and Charlie. And so, yeah, I got to add those two scenes in there, which was fun. But the podcast scene was amazing. It was super fun to shoot. Storyboarding. This was the first project I ever storyboarded. I got it from Ridley Scott. He has a cool story because he storyboards. You know, um, I remember hearing the story when it came to when he signed on to do Alien. He got the call. He went to California. They met with him. No director wanted to do it, and he was like, "I'll do it." And so they're like, "Great." So he went back to London and storyboarded for a month, and then he called up 20th Century Fox and said, "Hey, we're gonna have to bump our budget up a ton." And there's so many interviews that he has where he says it's crazy what a pen and paper can do to a budget. And he's right. And so storyboarding the Black Dome scene was really fun. I got the basic shots down. Even storyboarding the office scene was fun. The podcast scene was fun. I don't know how to draw yet. I would like draw rectangles for the faces because I tried to learn but it was just taking up too much time for me. And I was like, I gotta get the basis of it. If any other human looked at it, they would think a 5-year-old did it. But I knew, which all that mattered, looking at it, okay, this actor's here, this actor's here, this is the camera angle, it's a high angle, it's a low angle. So yeah, but it was fun. I'll definitely do it again. When it comes to shooting on set, I really only shoot 4 to 5 hours. I don't feel like it's necessary to do a lot of takes. Obviously, each scene is different. If I'm shooting a 10-page scene, that might take a little longer. But most scenes are 1 to 3, maybe 4 pages. And so what helps is the rehearsals. That's what helps because that enables the actors to really get it down within 1 to 3 takes. And so shooting for 4 or 5 hours is really fun. It keeps people on their toes and they know, hey, this isn't going to take all day. This is nice. We'll be shooting from 10 to 1 or 2 p.m. and they have the rest of the day free. And that's what my actors, they love that. They tell me all the time, thank God, this short film is only taking 4 or 5 hours. It's not taking, 10 hours for 10 different days. So yeah, that's it's because I feel like 4 to 5 hours is if Chris Nolan only films for 4 to 5 hours, why should I make it any longer? The last scene we shot was of the film was the scene in the parking lot. The film was gonna premiere Friday, and we shot that Sunday night. And the next day I was editing, and I finished it Monday night, Tuesday morning. But that was with Steven. That was cool. And shot wise, I knew that was going to be easy too, just because there wasn't a lot going on. We had one, ultra wide shot, and then we had two kind of single frame shots, and then or medium shots, and then two close ups. Um, that was the last one we shot. That scene. The reason why it took so long was because, well, one, I had to make sure everybody was available at that time, and it took a little longer, which was fine. People were out of town. I was out of town, and then yeah, but it all worked out, and it was a really fun scene to shoot because one, it was simple. There's obviously a lot of depth that was involved, but at the same time, it was simple enough to where, no one has to cry. No one is losing a family member. No one's dying. It's a simple conversation between two people. And, that's not, Steven did a great job. He didn't overact. I feel like I did a good job. I didn't overact either. And as far as the shots and everything, we used one light. That was it. And yeah, it was a good scene to end on, I feel like. Yeah, so the backlighting I mainly wanted on John. And there's three scenes that cause of backlighting, I believe. There's the one scene he's when John is talking to me on the balcony. There's that scene. And then the other backlighting is when me and him are sitting down and he's telling me, I presume you have some questions. There's backlighting on that. Actually, yeah, so there's only two scenes, not there, there's two scenes. When it comes to the backlighting, it's a really cool shot because you can get a little bit of light on the actor's face, but for the most part, they're in the shadows. And so with those scenes, I was like, okay, I'm gonna have Charlie kind of more in the light, and then I'm gonna have, John with that backlight, so where you can't really see a lot of his face, and it's more shadowy and it's more dark and it's more, evil in a sense. That came from I just, it just it just clicked one day. It was we were about to do the scene, and I was like, I think we shot the first scene we shot with the backlight was the scene between me and Ross, where he's telling me, I presume you have some questions. And I told my gaffer, my grip, I was like, hey, I want the light in the back and just beam it down on him, just so that way it's more of a powerful shot. And I don't know, it just came. I knew I didn't want to see his face fully, but then I was like, but make my face more clear, so that way, more light on my face, so that way the audience can kind of tell the difference of how innocent Charlie was and how dark John really was. So. Editing took probably all in total about 2 weeks. I would go from shooting a scene to write it because I shot mainly during the day to write back home, and I would go to edit, or at least the very next day I was editing. It took probably a total of 2 weeks. The filming process, shooting days were about 8 or 9 days. And so but over the course of like a month, 8 or 9 days over the course of a month, and then editing was done in 2 weeks within about 2 months. But I was constantly looking at different scenes. The intercutting of different scenes wasn't really there in the script. As I was watching the film over and over without intercutting, I was getting bored out of my mind. And I was like, man, maybe this needs something. And I was like, oh, maybe I, add in some intercuts with that. So then one scene that had some intercuts, and then I was like, oh, okay, maybe I could do that in this scene as well, and that scene and that scene. And then wow, it turned out into this very beautiful moment. That happened probably between 3 or 4 days within editing. So it happened very, very early on in the editing process, but it was something that was definitely needed. So with this film that I got a lot of inspiration from was definitely, Eyes Wide Shut. Also, look wise was from Monster, with Ryan Murphy. Uh, how his DP lights up those shots is so beautiful, and it's cool because it's a series, but it looks like a movie. So you really have like a 8-hour movie that you're able to watch, and the coloring is amazing. You have the blue and the orange, and it's just such a beautiful picture, that you're able to show to humans, to mere mortals, And I think that, yeah, that coloring was definitely a big inspiration that I was able to grasp. The lenses that I use are amazing, and like I said, I use 2 to 3 lights each scene. So it's not a lot, but it goes to show if you have the right tools, you can do a lot of great things with a picture. But yeah, it was a great film. It was really fun to put together. The cast was phenomenal. And I can't wait for the next one.